Hello, my name's Osha. I like talking about American presidents. I've been discussing the Bill of Rights, and I had promised to go into every one of the 10 Bill of Rights and expound on them, explain them properly. I realized that one way to learn material is actually to provide concrete examples rather than just providing theoretical definitions and explanations. So, what I'm going to do today is go into history and provide concrete examples of the working of the Bill of Rights and how things played out. Um, in 1835, end of 1835, a congressman, James Hammond from South Carolina. If you recall, I've actually done a video about James Hammond. He's the one who propounded the mudsill theory, and he also made claims that slaves in the South actually were better taken care of, more well fed, and lived better lives uh, than free paid white labor in the North. He made other claims, and of course, he's the author of the Plantation Manual. So that's James Hammond. James Hammond was a congressman from South Carolina at that time. Later on, he would go on to become a senator, but at this time, he was a, um, a congressman, and he introduced the notion, the gag rule. The gag rule that was to table, introduce the gag rule that was to table any discussion of slavery, any anti-slavery discussion or petition. The idea was to foreclose, to forestall any anti-slavery petition. So the gag rule, tabled any discussions on slavery. So tabling, it was used in another sense back then. Tabling meant to prevent any discussion. That was how it was used back then in this instance. So it was approved in 1836. So the gag rule was in effect, and nobody could discuss any matter concerning slavery, and it was forestalled. However, the person, interestingly, the person who enforced it, who enforced the gag rule, who was the Speaker of the House at that time, became our 11th president. That's James Knox Polk. He was Speaker of the House at that time. Remember, James Polk is also the only person to have ever served as Speaker of the House who became president as well. So he's the only president who ever held the position of Speaker of the House. So James Polk enforced the gag rule, and however, it was opposed by another president, John Quincy Adams. He was a congressman at this time from Massachusetts. John Quincy Adams is the only former president, who went to serve in Congress after his tenure as president. So after uh, our sixth president, that's John Quincy Adams, after he left office, and again, histrionomics also pegs him as our president with the highest by far, of having by far the highest IQ of any president. That's using histriometrics. So John Quincy Adams, he was a congressman, and he was a staunch abolitionist. He talked against slavery, and they had introduced the gag rule. Another person who would go on to become president enforced the gag rule. That's James Polk, and this was from 1836. It was being enforced by James Polk. John Quincy Adams was now arguing, he led an opposition arguing that the gag rule actually violated the First Amendment. It violated free speech, freedom of speech, and it also violated the right to petition the government. So, however, the gag rule was in effect, and it wasn't repealed until 1844. So they had gathered enough votes to repeal it. So it wasn't the gag rule was not abrogated through judicial review or judicial act. It was repealed through a legislative act. So Congress voted, they had enough votes to actually repeal the gag rule, saying it was unconstitutional, it violated freedom of speech, and it violated our right to petition. Now, those are in the First Amendment. They are enumerated rights. Remember, they are enumerated rights. So that's an example of enumerated rights. So you see that the fact that we have rights that have been listed in the Constitution, it doesn't mean that they're automatically respected, right? It doesn't mean that it's just automatic that those rights are respected. Even the government, people in government may try to violate those rights, and we have mechanisms to declare the violation of those rights unconstitutional. In this instance, they didn't get an injunction or go to the courts to have it declared unconstitutional, to repeal the gag rule. No, they used a legislative act. It was done in Congress through a legislative act. So that's an enumerated right, the freedom of speech and the right to petition the government. It's in the First Amendment. I discussed what enumerated rights, are. Now, I want to give an example of an unenumerated right. Unenumerated rights, remember, the Ninth Amendment says that even though, the rights have not been enumerated, the rights are still retained by the people. That's the Ninth Amendment. The people haven't given up those rights. An example of unenumerated rights are our rights to privacy, right? Privacy rights are not listed in the Bill of Rights or in the Constitution, but it's implied. And the laws, the amendments that jurists have asserted imply those rights or contain those rights include the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment prohibits the government from unreasonable search and seizure in our homes, right? So it assumes that in our homes we have a right to privacy. And the Fifth Amendment, that's your right to remain silent, so that you don't self-incriminate, right? So you have the right to not to provide private information to the government or the police when you're under arrest, right? So that implies a right of privacy. And the 14th, so the Fifth Amendment, the Fourth Amendment as well, as I stated, and then the First Amendment. The Third Amendment as well. The Third Amendment, when it prohibits, the quartering of soldiers because it's in our home. So you have rights of privacy. So privacy rights are implied unenumerated rights, but they're still retained by the people. And I've talked about how the courts actually applied it in the case Griswold versus Connecticut regarding, the privacy of married couples to use contraceptives. It's been expanded later on applied later on in Lawrence versus Texas in the right to the privacy of your sexual orientation. Let me apply something. I want to do is, since I stated I related those rights to presidents, the First Amendment to our presidents. That's James Knox Polk. He became president later on. He was Speaker of the House at the time. And John Quincy Adams, how he defended the First Amendment rights, saying the gag rule violates the freedom to petition the government and freedom of speech. And if subsequently the gag rule was repealed in 1844, declared unconstitutional by a legislative act. Now, today, I mentioned Privacy Act, right? Because Privacy Acts, our rights of privacy. I didn't mention Privacy Act. Actually, there's a Privacy Act of 1974. Privacy Act of 1974. Now, currently, our incumbent president, who's number 47, he was number 45. When he was number 45, in 2017, he issued an executive order that was actually sort of violated a privacy act, that violated our rights to privacy. So there's a Privacy Act of 1974, which restricted, it protected, our private information, said the government can't access our information or publish it without our consent. In 2017, President Trump actually issued an order saying that internet service providers were no longer required to obtain permission from customers in order to collect uh, to collect and publish, private information, their customers' private information, including your browsing history and things like that. And it also, I was in 2017 as well. It also stated that personally identifiable information could be published for non-citizens. Now, it's very difficult for businesses that are just collecting data and publishing it on the internet. How do businesses know that many people who are not Americans, who are not even their customers, how do they know if they're citizens or not citizens? How do they know if they're lawful or not? For instance, I'm an American citizen, but my name is Nigerian, Olurotimi Osha. Many people, many on employees, staff that are not so conscientious, they see my name, they just assume I'm a foreigner, I'm not an American citizen, right? So it violates a lot of our rights, protections that we have. It makes us, liable, to the violation of our rights by internet service providers, because, and by the way, there's a court case, right? There's a court case that says a lot of protections that we have in America, they're actually applicable to non-citizens as well, such as the 14th Amendment. You don't have to, the 14th Amendment, your right of due process and equal protection of the law, it's not applicable only to American citizens, right? You get due process of law even if you're not non-citizen as well. That's what the courts have, stated. And that is the case. Hamden versus Rumsfeld. I remember we did that case in law school. Hamden versus Rumsfeld. It says that you still have the right, that even non-citizens, foreigners, still have the right of due process. You have the right of due process, and that can't be violated. You don't have to be an American citizen to have rights of due process. And it raised the supremacy clause. The supremacy clause says that courts, it established the supremacy of law, and it says that the Constitution, that's the U.S. Constitution, the federal statutes and treaties, those are the supreme laws of the land. Now, an executive order is not considered supreme law of the land. It's restricted. An executive order has limited applicability, right? It only applies to federal government employees within the executive branch, and those under the purview of the president, right? An executive order can be declared unconstitutional by the courts, right? Or there can be an injunction to stop an executive order, right? So it's not like a federal statute that has, has a weight of law. It's subject to, so an executive order is subject to judicial review. A judge can declare it unconstitutional, right? That this is an unconstitutional order. So let me apply how privacy, the reason that I'm going into this privacy, the rights of privacy thing, is because I've given my spiel about my rights being violated in trumped up charges in Montgomery County, Maryland, in order to obstruct justice, right? So it violates my rights of privacy. So ostensibly, I was raided without an arrest warrant in my home on May 16, 2023 by Montgomery County Police. They released tear gas. They bombed, they threw, some kind of chemical bomb into my apartment. They claimed later on in the hospital, I was told it was tear gas. I felt it was some kind of narcotic, and they had used, it was a swatting. They had spread false information, about what was going on. Then eventually when I was, arrested at the hospital after I was treated, because, I was stitched and all that stuff from my injuries. I was treated from my injuries. When I was then arrested, at the hospital later on. And when I was taken to the station, I read the charge statement. It said that that I threatened to shoot a guy called, shoot my uncle. He's not my uncle. A guy called Jide Ware. Immediately, this was completely false. And I'm like thinking, no, I've never threatened to shoot anybody. This is completely false. So they let me make a phone call. I made a phone call, and there was a sergeant standing right next to me. His name is Sergeant Ajibade, right? He's a Nigerian guy, and he was standing right next to me. And so I called Jide Ware. He was right there on speaker. And I read the charge statement to him that it said that I threatened to shoot him. And he immediately said, no, that's inaccurate. I knew it was inaccurate. That's a complete lie. I've never threatened to shoot anybody in my life. So I was reading this for the first time. And he said, that's an error. It can be corrected. I'm still stunned that I'm at the station, that they're arresting me. I'm still shocked, at what's going on. So eventually, I asked to speak with an officer, right? I spoke with this guy, and he was telling me that, hey, because I was telling him that these charges are false, that the charge statement, the charge statement is a representation, and, I have a law degree, right? I'm saying that, okay, hey, that police aren't supposed to be issuing false charges, and I'm saying that the charge statement is actually a falsification. It's a misrepresentation. And the person they named, Jide Ware, he was right there in front of an officer, a sergeant, saying, no, that's inaccurate, right? So I was telling this officer, and the officer was saying, no, that he wrote that Jide Ware is lying, that he actually wrote it he wrote his claims on a document. It's a court document. I'd never heard of an EAP before in my life, right? So they're saying he has a court document and he wrote it down. I'm like, okay, can I see the document? And so they're saying, okay, the guy tells me I should get a private attorney. I should go and get a private attorney. And then he's saying that the guy said I didn't want him to come to my home. I said, yes, I told him not to come to my home. That's all I said. I have a right to tell him not to come to my home. So, but the officer starts to tell me something that violates my privacy rights. So you see, like, police officers don't even know the law, right? So this guy starts to tell me, well, why didn't I want him to come to my home? That's weird that my family thought, because he was saying it was my family. So I thought that this wasn't even just Jide Ware, because all he kept saying was my family. That's the police officer. He was saying my family said I was acting strange. I didn't want them to come to my home. I'm like, who's my family? My family's in Nigeria, And it turns out the person they're calling my family is this guy, Jide Ware, who's not my family. There's no consanguinity between us. He's not my family. I met him here in America. He's a fabulous, he's not my uncle. He was, he's never, So in any event, this officer is telling me that, well, that I didn't want my family to come to my home, and that was strange. So what right does that violate? Our privacy rights, right? It's my home. We still have a right to be let alone. That's a privacy right. That's a constitutional right. We have a right to be let alone. It's an unenumerated right, where it's implied. It's within the privacy rights. We have a right to be let alone. So, Jide Ware, Montgomery County, the government was violating my right to be let alone, my privacy rights, by claiming that, well, because I wanted to be let alone, there must have been something wrong with me, and therefore they came with a troop, 40 cops, to come and raid me and assault me in my home, removing me naked from my apartment. I was removed by the state of Montgomery County naked. It's astonishing that the media, corporate media, that's in the pockets of, rogue government agents, or, I don't know. They haven't reported this. Unfortunately, only one Nigeria outfit has reported it. Nobody has carried this. This is over 2 years now. It's going on 3 years, and my rights were violated. A law-abiding American, even if you're not law-abiding, you still have due process rights. So my due process rights, those are due process, by the way, that those are enumerated rights, because due process of law, it's in the Fifth Amendment, right? You have a right of due process. It's in the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment packs a lot of things. It packs the right, privacy rights, which is implied, the right not to self-incriminate. It packs that in there. It also has the due process of law rights. The due process of law is also in the 14th Amendment. It's 14th Amendment is not part of the Bill of Rights. The 14th Amendment, that's part of what's called the Reconstruction Acts, right? Which, I've done videos talking about that, those laws. So 14th Amendment includes the due process of law rights, and it applies that, it reflects that back, projects it back to the states. So a number of rights that I've stated were violated. My privacy rights were violated. The police had no arrest warrant, so my Fourth Amendment rights were violated. So due process of law, prohibiting unreasonable search and seizure, right? That was violated because the police didn't have any arrest warrant. So they violated my due process rights, my privacy rights. And then eventually, when trumped-up charges were filed against me, the judge was trying to coerce me, right, to now do an evaluation. The state wanted me to do an evaluation, right? That, of course, the objective is also to discredit any claims that I have, because the police had fabricated what happened. I was the victim. I was the one who was there, my witness, right? Everything that happened, that they wrote that happened, was a lie. I have, my recollection of events, how they occurred, and I'm allowed to give my own testimony in court. So the judge was again violating my privacy rights and my rights of autonomy, which is in your First Amendment. My rights of autonomy, my privacy rights, that's also in the Ninth Amendment, by doing a false incompetency to stand trial order, right? He's saying I don't understand my charges. He's saying that I don't understand court proceedings. He's saying I can't work with a lawyer, even though I'm a lawyer. I have a law degree. I have a right. I can represent myself. So he does a false incompetency to stand trial order, ordering me to go and take treatment to be found competent. Fortunately, the doctors were all in agreement with me that, well, no, this man has no mental illness. This man is competent to stand trial. And the judge has done this twice. So he's violated my rights to privacy, right? My rights of autonomy, right? So those are privacy rights. He also violated my Fifth Amendment rights. Fifth Amendment rights also has your privacy rights, my right not to self-incriminate. When the state is taking me somewhere and asking doctors or psychiatrists to talk to me so I can give them information, right, which the state can use against me, it violates my right to remain silent, my right not to self-incriminate. And if I don't cooperate with those people, once I'm in a hospital, a state psychiatric hospital, once I'm with them, if I don't cooperate with them, the judge will never find me competent, right? So you can see how Judge James Bonifant of Montgomery County was using false incompetent stand trial orders, right, to violate my privacy rights, my right of due process, and my right not to self-incriminate. And so consequently he was committing what's called fraud on the court, and this has been going on. So those are right of due process. Again, those are enumerated rights. It's expressly stated in the Fifth Amendment, rights of due process. It's stated in there. You have due process rights, and it also violates unenumerated rights, privacy rights. It's implied in the Fifth Amendment as well, and the Fourth Amendment as well. So the other rights that have been violated, my rights to a fair trial, that's the Sixth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment, that's an enumerated right. The Sixth Amendment says I'm to have a fair trial. So it's unfair. I'm not having a fair trial when the judge is committing fraud on the court, when he's giving false incompetency orders to stand trial orders to help the state in order to discredit me, right? So the judge claimed that, well, he wanted to make sure that, so the state of Maryland, you know, disingenuously states that the reason they order competency to stand trial, or they issue competency to stand trial orders arbitrarily, especially to minorities, black men, is because they want to be fair. They want to make sure an individual is fair. Well, how do they? It's unfair if they're selective, because I've never stated that I have a mental illness. So if the state is assuming because I'm black and I'm a foreigner, or somebody's lied, that I have a mental illness and therefore I should have I should see a psychiatrist, and and they can use a false incompetency to stand trial order to commit me in order for me to speak with a psychiatrist, that's unfair, right? Because it's discriminatory. It's not applied evenly. How do they come to these decisions, right? So it's not applied in an objective and fair manner. It's applied in a discriminatory manner. It violates also my rights to my own agency. I have my own agency. I'm the one who will say, well, do I have a mental illness? Do I understand the charges or not? I'm the one who would assert these things, right? The judge can't just arbitrarily assume. In fact, so when he's being discriminatory based on racism, or based on a white father, great white father figure notion, or his megalomania or something, or whatever reason, or xenophobia, that is an instance of unfairness. So it violates the Sixth Amendment rights, my right to a fair trial. It violates my right to a fair trial. It violates my right to a speedy trial. Those are enumerated rights in the Sixth Amendment. So I haven't had a speedy trial. It's been almost 3 years now, and I haven't had a trial. But the judge has locked me up for 9 months in jail. Over 9 months. I've been incarcerated for about 9 plus 6. About 15 months, right? That I've been locked up. Apart from the house arrest. I was under house arrest for over 7 months. I've been detained, my name's been, the information published in Maryland's public profile is defamatory. It's false, right? So it's defamatory. I've been defamed. It violates my due process rights. My PII, personally identifiable information, has been published. I've been defamed. So many rights that have been violated. I've been denied an investigation, a fair investigation by the state, because the police actually committed an armed robbery under color of law. They stole my certificate of naturalization, or someone stole it, since they removed me. My US ID card, my social security card, my debit card, and money was stolen from my bank account while I was in the hospital, while I was locked up. And, so when we don't have the legal system, the law enforcement, working fairly to protect our rights, but they're actually working against us to rob us, and there's a court proceeding associated with this, clearly I'm not having a fair trial, right? When the police have filed false charges against me, and there's a judge who's actually citing them. Obviously, I don't have I've been denied an impartial judge, right? So when there are charges against you, they want to take away any of your rights, your 14th Amendment rights, due process of law, 5th Amendment rights as well. You're entitled to notice. You're entitled to a right to dispute. So Jide Ware ostensibly claimed he's denied it, but they said he wrote that I threatened to shoot him. I have a right to dispute it, to say, Jide Ware, you're lying. It's going on 3 years now. I've been denied that right. Right? I have a right to an impartial judge. I don't know if James Bonifant is Jide Ware's friend. He might be impartial. The judge who approved the emergency evaluation petition, Judge Bibi Berry, she might be a friend of Jide Ware or Jide Ware's kids, because 2 of Jide Ware's children graduated from, two of his kids are lawyers, and Judge Bibi Berry got her undergraduate from Howard University, and Jide Ware has been a professor at Howard University for what, 40 years. So they might know each other. You know, it's Maryland, it's a small community, so it might be something that they did behind shadily, you know, because I was never given any notice. I was never given an opportunity to challenge any of these things. I've had no impartial judge. So these violate my enumerated rights, my due process of law rights. So my privacy rights are implied, where, you know, my right to be let alone. I was in my home. I just told you there, I don't want you to come to my home. But the police is saying, well, because you don't want him to come to your home, there must be something wrong. And so they came with an armed troop, ostensibly 40 cops. I have a right to, you know, to challenge my accuser in a court of law. That's a Sixth Amendment right. If somebody makes an accusation, I have a right to dispute it. I have a right to cross-examine in a court of law. I have a right to ask witnesses. I have a right to present my witnesses. Those are Sixth Amendment rights that have been violated. I have a right to a public trial. All of this has been violated. I haven't had a trial yet. I've been locked up for I've been detained for over 2 years. I was locked up for about 15 months. So the thing that I've learned in all of this is I've lived in America going on 27 years now, over 26 years, and I'm an American citizen, and I'd never experienced what I was experiencing now. I was a federal government employee when this happened. I have an excellent record, right? I can match my record beside James Boniface. I'm a man of integrity. My friends will tell you that. My family and my friends, not the fraudster impersonating himself as my uncle. Jide Ware is not my uncle. He's delusional. He can find his uncle, his family somewhere else. My family, I can give his background. We don't know where he's from, right? He would give me a story that he didn't know who his real mother was when he was an adult. I'm astonished. You need to go and check who Jide Ware really is. My family said he's about 85 years old. I saw his certificate of naturalization. That's not the age he gave. He gave a false age in his American citizenship and his records. He's falsified his age. We don't know who Jide Ware really is, right? So, in any event, my rights have been violated, and I hope that as I've discussed, you know, this Bill of Rights, and I'm stating how my enumerated rights have been violated, my Sixth Amendment rights, my due process rights, the Fifth and Fourth Amendments, these have all been violated, and of course my implied rights, my privacy rights, right? Those are unenumerated rights. I've shown how these apply to my instance, and I hope, you know, that I get justice. And my name is Olurotimi Osha. Again, I like talking about American presidents. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.